Hello everybody, welcome to the VegfestUK Summerfest Online 2020. First time we've done this, and it has been an exceptional weekend of panels. Those of you joining us now live, very warm welcome, especially if you're joining us from around the globe. One of the huge benefits of the online potential here is to connect around the globe, and this is one of the panels that is going to be doing just that. This is available later. It's being recorded, so if you want to listen later, you can come back for the next 30 days to the VegfestUK Summerfest online platform here. There's some really good presentations already there, and this one will be available from tomorrow. So you're very welcome to bring your friends back, or come and have a look, or come and share those resources later too. So we've had a fantastic weekend. We've had some awesome panels, and once again, I am very fortunate to be joined by my co-host here, Karin Ridges. Karin is coming from across the globe in deepest, darkest Essex, which is just the other side of London, for those of you who are familiar. Karin, it's wonderful to join us once again. Thank you indeed. How's things in Essex?
You know what, Essex is fantastic, and over the past 25 years of me being vegan, I've seen veganism explode even in deepest, darkest Essex here in the UK.
Well, it's lovely to see you, Karin. What we're going to do here is just briefly, we've got sort of, I can't even remember actually, I think 5 guests. I can't even see them all at the top there, but they're coming in from around the globe. So I'm just going to ask all of our guests just to kindly wait in there to just introduce themselves. It's basically a global veganism panel. None of us have prepared anything in particular, so it's going to be a kind of random chat, but very interesting perspectives. So I'm going to start with one of my long-standing friends, who I believe I was partly influential in helping go vegan about 20 or 30 years ago, Sheila.
Hey Tim.
Hello.
Hey.
So Sheila, where are you joining us from this evening?
I'm now based in Egypt, in Dahab in Sinai. I've been running a restaurant here for 3 years. I went vegetarian 40 years ago, and I've kind of gone fully vegan for 8 years, and then I volunteered. I found out about Sea Shepherd on at your VegFest festival in Bristol, and then I started working or volunteering on Sea Shepherd boats as a vegan cook, and I've done 4 campaigns for Sea Shepherd now. I spent about a year on the boat cooking for crew. And then I came to land and kind of settled a little bit in Egypt. And so then I've been doing the restaurant here for 3 years now. And we were the first fully vegan restaurant in Sinai in Egypt.
That's wicked. Thanks for that. What I'm going to do, actually, come back later, Sheila, and ask you to tell us a little bit about some of your visits into Palestine too.
Okay.
Some of the connections you've got there, some of the work you're doing there. I'm going to just turn now to some gentleman who was very kind to invite me to the very first VegFest Morocco event, which was just 2 weeks ago. It's a tremendous honour to be invited and address a largely Northern African attendees. I believe my talk was translated into Arabic and into French. And it's been marvellous to be able to reciprocate that invitation and invite Simohamed to come and join us. I believe you're in, well, tell us, Simohamed, where are you calling from tonight?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, team, for giving me this opportunity to be with you today. First of all, I am Simo, vegan activist in Morocco, founder of VegFest Morocco, and president of the first association, vegan association in Morocco, is called Veg Morocco. Climate change activist with climate safe movements as a researcher to make the research about climate in North Africa, and I'm working with the woman who victim violence as a psychotherapist in Morocco. So that's it. I'm vegan for 5 years. Just that's it. Thank you so much.
That's great, Simo. Thanks for that. And we'll be coming back to you and ask you to just tell us a little bit more about the actual event, who was involved, how you got the inspiration, and, you know, spend 5 minutes telling us about your experiences, because it really is a fascinating and very, very interesting adventure there. And it was breathtaking. Honestly, it was wonderful. So,
Thank you so much.
Christy, you are a long-standing visitor to VegFest. You've been coming to VegFest for a number of years. And we always have two things when Christine Vardaros comes to VegFest. We have a swear box and we have a right laugh. And then we also get a lovely goodie bag afterwards too. So all of these things we remember. Christine, tell us, where are you at tonight?
Well, right now I'm calling in from Leuven, Belgium, where I live now, and yeah, I'm usually traveling around the world racing my bike, but with Corona, it's been basically traveling around in my mind, so it hasn't been the same. But it's been a different year for us cyclists. And as for the global veganism, it's interesting what Karin was saying about how she's seen it like even spread to like Essex throughout the professional cycling field. It's been just amazing. I remember the first time I turned vegan 20 years ago. I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. You know, all signs point to being vegan as performance enhancement. You know, it's like my version of, you know, EPO, my vegan version, whatever, my health conscious. And so I did that. And then I remember my first bad race I had. By then, the whole entire peloton knew that, like, I'm the crazy lady with the vegetables. And I had a bad race. I had to race the next day. I remember sitting in the fish aisle. You know, like when you're thinking to, you know, fall back on your old ways. First thing you do is you go to fish because, you know, you can't really relate to a fish. So I said, okay, I'm gonna maybe eat a fish. I called up my coach. My coach said, don't you dare, you step away from that fish aisle, you go back, you make yourself vegan pancakes, get up in the morning and race your bike. Gosh darn it. No, you didn't say gosh darn it.
Cheers. No, I bet not, yeah.
Yeah, and some other competitor said to me, she said, it's because your broccoli diet. She was in the fish aisle too. And yeah, the next day I kicked her butt too. And a few years later, she wrote to me privately and she said, guess who's vegan?
Oh, well done, Christine. Oh, fantastic, because I know you're a cyclist and stuff, and it must be tough at the moment. So, we'll come back to you and ask you for some more anecdotes, actually, because you've always got a great story or two to tell us about your adventures, and I'm sure even during lockdown too. Cina, I'm going to come to you. You're coming into us from Seattle, I think, isn't it?
That's right.
Hello?
Yeah. I'm here.
So what's happening in Seattle at the moment?
Lots of stuff. The police are waged war basically on protesters who are, you know, people who are protesting against, you know, the murders of Black people like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. It's a war zone here right now.
Oh, Cina, I've been following you on Facebook. Cina was a guest. You was a guest, I think, maybe 3 years ago. You came over and joined us at the VegFest Olympia. And I'm in a couple of groups, you know, quiet little. There's a little in-house tea joke that we have that you know, some of us know what I'm on about. That I'm sure you do. But I do keep an eye on your posts and such like, and you know, I know for a fact that you've been in the wars, undoubtedly. So we'd love to hear a bit more about that. So when we come back to you, if you want to spend perhaps 5 minutes telling us about, you know, what happened. I think perhaps was it 2 weekends ago, 3 weekends ago now. you'll be it's quite a story. So
Yeah.
Jay, you were on this morning. We were very nearly actually joined by a second panelist with you, Jay, weren't you? It was your beautiful daughter. Came and said hello earlier. Hopefully we were going to join us, but I think she's probably gone to bed now. But it's very good to join us. Where are you joining us from, Jay?
Well, I mean, testament to the exotic panel all across the world. I am in South London, live and direct from my bathroom. I think that's what makes it so exciting for me, though.
We love South London. SIFF.
Because again, just to point out that my voice apparently when it's in the house keeps my daughter awake. So if we're going to be doing this kind of stuff, this time of the evening, I've got to relegate myself to the bathroom so that the little one can get her head down.
That's brilliant, Jay. And Jay, it's very good of you because I know you was up early and joined us just this morning when Karin and I were doing a chat. Wasn't it, Karin, when we had a VegfestUK chat this morning? So we've got a really nice array of guests. Hopefully you'll all be able to stay with us. But I'm just going to come back. I mean, basically what I'd like to do is just spend perhaps 5 minutes because you've all got really interesting perspectives. Jay, I know what I'd like you to do is just actually tell us a little bit about your new initiative that you were doing, because although you are based in South London, which of course from a Bristol perspective is quite a trek. I have friends in South London. I can guarantee you that South London is quite a way away. I go up to Crystal Palace actually to watch football every now and again. So it's a way away. But you've got a really interesting project, which I know is likely to tell us.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the segue. And actually, as well, I think listening to both Simo and Cina, what they were both touching on, it kind of reminded me of the kind of the interconnectedness of, I suppose, veganism, but then I suppose also then the intersectionality, because the conversations about oppression, about police brutality, but then also about like environmental racism and like climate change, particularly as it affects the Sahel region and a lot of North Africa as well. These are all kind of interconnected stories that weave through work that we're all doing. But to bring that back to a kind of focus for me, yes, in the wake of the social moment that has come about because of the murders in America of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery in particular, which kind of brought the focus in, I founded and created a new institute, the Black in the Open Institute, which is now, it's 10 weeks old now. Time has been moving so quickly. But this institute was created to, in essence, try and convert what I kept on seeing as a horizontal stuff like a Black Square Tuesday, which ultimately, great optics, but doesn't do anything the day after. Like nothing can come of something so performative. And it was like, how can we turn these horizontals into a vertical? How can we make everybody who promises something on that day to then be held accountable to it? So that in a year's time on that day, we can say, so what did you do after your Black Square that day? What did you do proactively to make a change rather than performatively? And so, yeah, it was to that we created the organization. Now, at the beginning, I created the organization by putting out a video on my social media, which was just called Dear White Friends. I spoke to my colleagues, friends, my wife, parts of my family now, and asked them that in this moment, like, I find it incumbent upon everybody to look at this as part of the human narrative and part of our story, not the story of Black people, the story of Americans, the story of, this is everybody's story. And it is therefore all of our duty to play an active role in doing something. And so I put out a challenge that I've been doing activism work, whether it's been veganism, whether or not it's been to do with toxic masculinity, youth work for the African Caribbean community. In some element, I've always had a very value-driven perspective. And the challenge was to everybody else, just remember what your values are, and how can we get people to, in remembering what your values are, kind of ascribe to them harder and kind of let's do something together. So yeah, 10 weeks on, our organization now has 30, 40 different volunteers who are supporting different work, and we now have a systemic program, a social program, and different individual programs. But again, I think we can maybe dive into that a little bit later. but from a top line perspective, it's just been like really powerful to be able to speak out to a network and then see people kind of bring back and people wanting to hold themselves accountable, like moving forward.
That's really interesting. I think that's a really, you know, we'll touch back on that a bit later on about, you know, how we're actually seeing change being implemented, because we've seen, you know, there's a lot of promise, but of course what happens is, you know, it's sustaining momentum. You know, you get an initiative, but then you've got to sustain it. Talking of sustaining, I'm going to ask Simo to come in actually, because Simo, you've just created something really quite unique, because I think it's the first event that has really vegan event that has spoken to the North African community at a time when a lot of the North African vegan community was celebrating Eid. So this was a couple of weeks ago. And it was quite an extraordinary event. I mean, it went for 4 days and it involved, yeah, over 40 countries and, you know, hundreds of thousands of people engaging in those talks. So Simo, I was just saying, tell us a little bit about it, and then what we'll come to later when we come back round is the plans for the future. But for now, just tell us a little bit about what happened this time round, and tell about what was an amazing occasion.
For amazing occasion for what?
Oh no, this is for Simo. Sorry, this is not for Simo. I've just been, this is for Simohamed. I've just realised you've got similar names. So Simohamed, I was talking about the VegFest Morocco initiative. I think we've lost Simohamed.
He's on mute.
Oh, okay. Can we? Oh. Oh, right. We got you. Hello.
Okay.
And we got you.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes, Simohamed, tell us a little bit about VegFest Morocco and then the slides here.
Yeah, I will share with you the history of my activism in Morocco, 2017 and 2020, for 3 years. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So the first in 2017, I will show you the veganism in Morocco, the first one, and I will show you the veganism in MENA region, or animal rights in MENA region, or Islamic or Arab world. So the first step in this path was creation of YouTube channel as the first channel in Morocco to raise awareness about veganism as lifestyle, not just diet. So I have a lot of videos in Arabic with the subtitle in English to explain the main reason people go vegan, the difference between veganism and vegetarianism, the history about the two, answering the most common question around this subject. So that's it. But the Moroccan media wrote dozens of positive, informative articles on veganism in Morocco, the first one in Morocco. So, but however, the thousand of harsh, sarcastic comments from Morocco, from people of Moroccan people, some which linking between vegetarianism with atheism and homosexuality. So honestly, I had explained this response because Arab people, the mostly social conservative, and they reject anything foreign for their culture. So in 2018, I organized the first vegan event in Morocco. The event is iftar for Muslim. This meal people take after the day of fasting in Ramadan. So it brought together many Moroccan vegan and as well non-vegan to, and we had the plant-based meal served to everyone. It was a very large garden, and everyone was happy to meet. And after the meal, we watched the vegan documentary, the What the Health, that's to raise awareness about the benefits of plant-based. So in the 2018, I succeeded to organize the very first even vegan festival. It's not only in Morocco, but in North Africa and Middle East. This this event is the presence of activist speakers from US, Switzerland, France, Spain, and a lot of and the rest of the world. So this is this festival was in the city of Fez, my home city, a historic city in older than 12th century in Morocco. It's the home of the oldest university in the world. So after that, in 2019, we started the first national association of vegans in Morocco, based in Casablanca. The association include members vary from Morocco, from Moroccan city. We had several training, workshop, outreach stand about animal rights, climate change, and we had a branch in partnership with the different restaurants in Casablanca and outside of it. So in 2020, the second edition of VegFest Morocco was cancelled due to COVID-19, but however, we were to organize the VegFest online, the first one, which went 4 days in three languages, Arabic, French, and English. For English Day, we meet Leah Garces, President of Mercy for Animal, Mr. Team, Melanie Joy, Animal Safe Movement Coordinator, EYES, and lots of speakers like Dora from Rwanda in Africa, and a lot of speakers from Iran, from Poland, etc., but French and Arabic. So now I want to show you veganism in Morocco is divided in two parts: the advantages and difficulties. From advantage, Moroccan food is easy to veganize, like couscous, rafisa, and tagine. It's easy to make it without animal products. So after that, the second point is fresh local vegetable and fruits. In Morocco, it's so cheap and available everywhere. So if countries of Middle East are categorized by hummus, Morocco have the wonderful vegan dish called zalouk, made plant out of eggplant. You should try it. It's so easy. So for difficulties, we have vegan. We don't have vegan restaurants in Morocco at all, but they are the vegetarian restaurants that offer the vegan option, a vegan recipe, but they are only found in the major city in Morocco. So now I will share talk with you the hardest obstacle to fight it. It's not only in Morocco, but in MENA region or Islamic world. So animal rights in MENA region, or Arab world, or Islamic world. So Arab people have grown up in culture where every week they watch the versus love chicken in front of them after buying it. Similarly, they watch sheep being slaughtered in their house every year in holiday, Eid al-Adha. So they witness all the stages of torture of animal endure every day, all the time, and the points where it's become normal for them to see this practice, and they don't need to those for example a cup of tea to shock them with this, because it's practice is normal for them. Because the way of mercy for animals in it's very difficult to convince Arab people because it's a religion in more culture which has another interpretation of the concept of mercy for animals. So environment or health is the best way to convince Arab society to switch to veganism. So what changed from 2017 and 2020? Vegetarian restaurants and new vegan meal operate, or at least add the term vegan in the menu. So vegan company like this, they start to produce vegan products, and one of them added the term vegan in the package. So Moroccan or Arab media have become more aware of veganism. So this is very, very important, because now we can to talk in veganism in Morocco, not problem or something like that. So what the future? Our association Veg Morocco, our goal is to create MENA vegan project to unify effort, and there is awareness in Arab countries about veganism, and create exchange of experience between association in Palestine, in Morocco, in Tunisia, and Lebanon, so Kuwait, etc. So thank you so much for being here. It's my pleasure to present this. If you have any question, I may to answer this. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow, Simohamed, that was brilliant. That was really, really interesting. I didn't realize that you had been so busy and so successful and so dynamic with your work. That's really interesting. Fascinating, actually. A really good insight into the cultural aspects and some of the barriers. I think that's really, really interesting. I do love the positivity you brought, and I know that there's a number of communities in Northern Africa that are really challenged by war and shortages and internal conflict. Sheila, I know, Sheila, you live in Egypt now. You mentioned, Sheila, that you've been travelled around the world. This is Sheila Hanney now, I'm just addressing. So Sheila, if you want to come in and maybe tell us, because I know that you live in Egypt, but you also have regular contact with people in Palestine. Tell us a little bit about that, Sheila, about what's happening when you go up to Palestine and such like.
That's how I ended up in the Middle East, because I started off volunteering on some psychosocial projects with the Palestinian Red Crescent, and that's how I ended up settled in Dahab, which is the neighbouring country. Yeah, I mean, the Middle East is notorious for what I call the overdeveloped world and the interference of the overdeveloped world in the Middle East. So currently, after the events of this year and during lockdown and the murders in America, I basically sort of pledged to myself that I would get involved again with the people that I'd known in Palestine, West Bank and Gaza, and to try and basically to sort of make direct links between people there that are reporting like firsthand on events that are happening in Gaza, and by using social media to put more people in the overdeveloped world in contact with people in the Middle East, just so people can make that human-human connection, because we're sort of entering into this period of a lot of media manipulation, a lot of fake news going out. I know I've watched news in Britain and it disturbs me greatly, really, because there seems to be a huge rise in racist attitudes and racist like behaviors now. And it's like all of a sudden it's okay to be racist. And again, on the intersectionality, it's like, okay, so you're bothered about this thing, but it's okay to be like not bothered about another human and another part of the planet. And then bringing that back to food politics, and again, what we've got in common with Morocco in Egypt is we have a huge availability of like local fruits, vegetables, basic ingredients. We don't have so many of the products, but on an environmental scale, that can be quite good, because again, they're like what I call now the overdeveloped world. Everything is wrapped in plastic. Things are getting quite expensive, and it's another thing that's always getting thrown at veganism and why people can't like eat more plant-based foods, adapt to more vegan lifestyle, is, oh, it's just a choice for like rich people in countries that have got a lot of food options, which on one hand is true, but when you come back to a lot of the places that I've visited as well or been to, the meat consumption isn't really high anyway. That's like something that's happened in, again, the overdeveloped world. It's just gone out of control, and the environmental like implications of that are huge. One of the other projects that I've volunteered on is Sea Shepherd. So I've seen firsthand the overfishing that can happen in every like country in the world now. It's just like the fishing fleets are again getting crazy. For one fish eaten by a human, 5 more are wasted, and of those fish, a lot of them are fed to like domesticated farm animals that are then consumed by humans. So we've extended the food chain not only by feeding grains to like animals to consume their meat, but we're also feeding them fish from the oceans. So it's got out of hand. And where our restaurant is based now, we're literally right 20 meters from the sea. So I put big signs out on the pavement. It's kind of obvious what we're talking about. I work as a partnership, the restaurant. I'm working with a Bedouin family that are one of the last Bedouin families that actually own their own land still in this sort of touristic town. But we're sort of trying to work together with the Bedouin families using produce from the Bedouins in the mountains, and just to encourage people that there are food options, because traditionally it's a fishing town. It was a fishing town, but that was 20, 30 years ago when there was a small population. And the problems we face now are that tourists come here, they think, oh, we're by the sea, we'll have a fish dinner, and they don't realise the implications of the overfishing on the local reef, and that a lot of that fish is being sold in the restaurants to tourists, which is actually illegal. So we have to be careful, we have to be mindful of traditions, but again, it's kind of got out of hand because of the influence of tourism here. We have a lot of tourists that are aware of the environmental impacts of eating and connecting it to the reefs and to the oceans and what we do. So that's good, like that's a positive, it's a progress, and it's good to be here right by the sea. We do vegan sushi nights and people come in and they're like, oh my God, this is the best sushi I've ever had. And it's like, yeah, and it hasn't got anything, there's no waste. We say it's all taste, no waste. And that's one of our things that we do. It's just like, I'm trying to just convert people like meal by meal. It's like, come in, try some vegan food. And we get like 100 different reactions, but patients like, oh my God, I didn't know vegan food tasted this good. It's like, well, it's vegetables. It's like you eat vegan food all the time. It's just fruit and vegetables. Yeah, okay, we mix it up a bit, and we're sort of been practicing for 3 years, so we're getting quite good at like making interesting meals. But again, it's demonstrating to people practically, here's the ingredients that you've got that are basic and local, but with a bit of imagination. You've seen the food in Morocco, it just looks incredible. There's a lot of local food here that's always been vegan, and it always will be vegan. And it's just funny, like, you know, if we're going to choose a direction at this point in history, let's go for like sustainable and plant-based, and let's move away from like the junk food that the overdeveloped world is trying to push onto like countries that they consider less developed. But I see things here and I'm just like, great, you can still go and buy rice and lentils without plastic packaging. I can get all my fruit and vegetables locally because we're not connected to these huge like markets and globalization. It's like it's all just a little bit more within reach. I've just been into the high mountains this week, and there's a lot of Bedouin farmers because of the COVID. There's been no tourism, so they've all gone back into their traditional gardens in the mountains. And there's been rain this year, really good rain, first time in 10 years. And like people are just gardening again and growing crops, and they've gone back to the land, and they've sort of moved away from tourism. So it's like, it's super sustainable. There's enough water now for the next 5 or 7 years crops, and people are getting really interested again in their gardens, and it's small scale, it's like super sustainable. And also the products that are coming from like 2,000 meters out, the taste of the herbs that you get from these high altitude places is just, it's incredible. So it's really nice. I've just been talking to people there and just getting more products. I've got like a load of apples, so we've turned the apples into products that we can use to sell in the town here. And again, to try and, you know, like make it a little bit more sustainable for people. Tourism is super fickle. It can change like fashion. One year it's like, oh, let's go to Egypt, and another year it's like, oh no, let's all go to Thailand, and then everyone in Egypt's like, shit. Yeah, again, it's like being more solid, working with people, working with what we've got to make hopefully like a better future for more people. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, which is good. I hope.
Right. That's really interesting. It's great to hear some of the positive aspects that are coming out of the lockdown too. I've heard this before actually in 1 or 2 countries. To return to the land is, you know, a big deal. Like because the basics, obviously, you know, the whole food rainbow plant-based diet, which time and again everybody is clear is that, you know, it's readily available in many places, and it's easy to transform into really dynamic meals. So it's good to hear that, Sheila. So it's good to hear some optimistic and you know, just to hear straight from where you are in Egypt there is fantastic. We'll be coming back to you in a bit. I don't want to leave Karin and Christine out of the conversation for very much longer, but I would just want to turn to Cina Ebrahimi, who's in Seattle. Cina, I know you've been talking to us about the, you know, on Facebook about the riots and especially, you know, what's going on there. So, and I think you got pretty badly hurt yourself in one like just several weeks ago. Is that right?
I did.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about what's happening and your perspective on this.
Well, there are no riots. There are protests. People like to call them riot. People who are critical of the protests, or at least what the protests are for, they say they're not against what the protests are for. They say, oh, you know, I support this, but I don't like these methods. This isn't protesting. This is rioting. And that's just coded language. That's their way of saying that they don't agree with what's happening. They're basically saying they think breaking windows is the same thing as killing unarmed Black people. That's how I look at it, and I think that's how most people look at it. So for a while, we've had multiple unarmed Black people being killed by police, and this has been happening for years. But the most recent have been Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery. And people are pretty fed up. And it's clear that these aren't isolated incidents. These are the product of a systematic institution that oppresses Black bodies, and the police are a big part of that. So in May, towards the end of May, just a little bit after George Floyd was murdered, people took to the streets, and they made it very clear that they weren't having this anymore. We want the police gone. we want that, and we want that money redirected into Black communities, because if you look at communities who don't have a lot of police, they have the most resources. Black communities and brown communities have the least resources, so they have the most police. And that's what takes Black kids and puts them into prison. So that's the short end of it. I was involved in a lot of the protests, and I did get injured, some more than me. But yeah, that's the short end of it. In June, after protests got really ugly, when the police escalated things, they always escalate things. The police left the area and they were gone for about close to a month. And then they came back in and took the police station back. And just recently, Seattle City Council just voted to defund the Seattle Police Department by 50%, I think. And our police chief just resigned over that.
So would you say, is there change happening there? Is that change? Do you see the change happening, or what's your kind of, what's your assessment from what you're seeing there?
So far, yes. Where this leads, I don't know. In speaking with one of the council members, they said that the police officers union, I think it's ridiculous that they even have a union, because police for years have always been enemies to the labor movement. But they said that the union might have enough pull to where they can force the city council to rehire those officers who have been laid off in the budget cuts, and have to pay them back that money for the time that they were gone. So we'll see what happens. And defunding the police is just first part of the battle. We need that money to go into Black communities.
I think there's quite a lot of misunderstanding. I know in the UK, people have heard this defund the police and they think, oh, it means getting rid of the police. But it's more about actually reallocating the resources, so the police are not having to deal with multiple issues. They're really just having to deal with a lot less, and that the resources are shared amongst the communities to get to the root of these problems, to stop them developing into the need really for police. Is that a fair assessment? Is that a good enough interpretation of?
I think so.
Explain what defund the police means, because I think in the UK there's a real lack of probably understanding of what that really means.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people want the police gone. They do believe in abolishing the police, but they instead think that if we defund the police and we do what you said, make them deal with a lot less rather than having them deal with multiple things, this will show that they think, and I think this is true, will show that we really have little to no need for police. Because like I said, in the neighborhoods that I grew up in that are mostly wealthy, upper class, we have the most resources, we have good schools, good healthcare. So there's really no reason for people to do things or commit crimes that would necessitate police. But in, South Seattle, where you have underfunded schools, lack of healthcare, things like that, that's where people turn to like doing quote unquote illegal activity. And that's where people say, okay, well, here's the problem, we need police, and then they arrest people, throw them in prison, and basically just ruin their lives. So yeah, I think if we defund the police and put that money where it ought to go, then we'll see that we have almost no need for police, if any need at all.
That definitely makes sense to me. I fully support that initiative, and I think it's really important to try and help people understand that. I know in our country, I mean, like where we live in Bristol, it's only 2 months ago that Bristol people decided to kind of go down and throw the statue of the slave trader Edward Colston into the river. And this is quite a symbolic moment. But what was also quite symbolic was not only did the people of Bristol decide to take the law into their own hands, as we say, and literally put that statue and throw it into the river. But the chief of police in Bristol, Andy Bennett, police officer Andy Bennett, was on telly. He allowed that protest to go ahead. He allowed that to go into the river. And he stood there being interviewed saying that he was a supporter of Black Lives Matter and that he could see structural and institutional racism, including institutional racism within his own police force. And that, you know, he was determined to allow these protests to go ahead peacefully, and that he saw his responsibility in keeping the peace was as much as how it was policed as how the crowds were to begin with. And this seemed to me like really evolved policing. And I know he got told off by the Home Secretary, nearly lost his job over that. There had to be a petition actually to keep Andy Bennett in his job, because the people actually supported the police conduct on the day, to the point where our government was thoroughly disgusted and made it clear to the people of Bristol that they did not support our police. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we've seen. But look, I'm going to move on a little bit, because obviously this is, you know, quite serious issues. But we're not just here to talk serious issues. We're also a little bit light-hearted too. And I know that Christine and Karin have been sitting there. And Karin, you know, you've known Christine for a long time, actually, haven't you? You've had Christine on multiple panels. You've had to tell her off on multiple occasions for her language, because Christine, you are actually from Brooklyn, I think, originally in New York. So Karin, what do you think? What's your take on Christine joining our panel right now? What do you think?
I think Christine is absolutely, utterly fabulous, and it made my day when I heard she was coming on our panel. Big fan of Christine. She's a fantastic speaker. We are very lucky to have her support. Professional cyclist and much, much more. Yeah, just can't wait to hear what she's got to say and have a lovely chat with Christine. So thank you for joining us, Christine, as everybody is, of course. But Christine and I, we've hung out at Bristol, we've hung out at London, and wish we could hang out together more.
I wish so too. It's a real honor to be here, and yeah, and I'm so happy to see all your faces again. And yeah, that's I'm just humbled by this whole experience. I could tell you, I all right, I'm gonna try to clean up my language so I don't do Brooklyn on you guys, but I could tell you, I'm hearing all this information about how veganism has been changing around the world. And from a professional athlete perspective, we're also seeing the same thing, where we're seeing now, I remember how I had to be in the closet, so to speak, with my vegan diet. It wasn't acceptable that I was strange. I was told to kind of, you know, keep it on the hush hush and don't say anything, because you never want to stick out in cycling, especially at the, you know, in a team sport. And I could tell you now, it's completely changed. In fact, the chefs are now actually catering to the vegan athletes. In fact, the Belgian Olympic cycling, actually the Belgian Olympic team chef who cooks for all the Olympics, all the Olympic athletes during the Olympics, he's actually promoting a vegan diet and trying to get all the athletes at the Olympics to eat vegan for performance enhancement. I mean, this is where we are today. And I could tell you from my other personal experiences, like with my teams, you know, like I've done the Women's Tour de France and whatever, World Cups, World Championships, a bunch of events, a bunch of stage races with teams, with my own team. And in the beginning, I you know, they all give me a bunch of, you know, all right, a really hard time, to say it cleanly. And but by the end of the, you know, end of the stage race or the end of the training camp, it's hysterical. They're all literally watching to see what Christine puts on her plate. You know, if Christine does oatmeal in the morning with an apple and a banana, guess what? The whole team will do oatmeal, apple, banana. It's just hysterical. And I remember one time I was in a training camp with my team, and I was the only female on a professional cycling team. It was for cyclocross. a different discipline of cycling. And it's one of those disciplines where you need 100% health to do well, because it's like there's no room for error. And I remember we were all on a training camp. You know, the first days they're all eating their big bowls of ice cream for dessert, and they're eating all their, you know, at the buffet, all their meat plates and this and that, and just going crazy, like, you know, with their monotone plates. And on the last day of stage of the training camp in Spain, I kicked their butts up the climb, up the first climb of the day, and then I continued to just smash them. And it was the funniest thing. During that 5-hour ride, each and every one of those athletes came up to me privately, not publicly, because you don't want to admit that maybe there's something to this broccoli diet. And they said, now I get it. I get it, and that's what I'm going to do now. So that evening, guess what? We were all eating our broccoli diet with our potatoes and whatever else. And everybody had the colorful plates, and everybody picked up their sorbet for dessert instead of the ice cream. And yeah, and now I probably single-handedly have helped maybe like a few hundred athletes to transition to veganism. It's amazing. Not all pros, but there were a few pros. And that I also think is really cool. And some of them are becoming more and more out of the closet. So it's changing. And that's kind of coming from a health perspective. And then once they find out about the animals, I've also heard from them to say, yeah, just like me, that's what keeps me strict with my diet. So the world is changing. And I'm really thankful to be a part of this, and humbled and excited. And yeah, and thank you to everyone else out there who's doing such a great job to be a part of this movement. It's truly is global veganism. Back to you, Karin.
Oh, that was lovely. I could just hang on. Well, I am hanging on your every word. That was absolutely fantastic. I had no idea 100 athletes. And, you know, these are people that are top of their game. Everything counts. You know, recovery, what they're eating, the calories, everything counts. Not just like me that runs down the road for the bus or something. You know, these are proper great athletes like you, Christine, as well. And I wanted to ask, because you do tour around the world, you spend your time in Belgium and in New York, in the UK, other places as well. I just wondered, when we're talking about sort of global veganism, is it similar around the world? You know, are you seeing some places are more ahead than others? Some people get it more than others. Are you seeing places that perhaps didn't really know much about veganism, it wasn't part of their culture, and now they're thinking, actually, we want to embrace this? What have you seen as in your travels?
Well, one thing I can tell you is, you know, from New York City, I could tell you that a lot has changed there. 30 years ago, when I first became vegetarian, I remember thinking, what is a vegetarian? No idea. I learned that quickly. And then I thought, where am I supposed to shop? Like, this has a special word. I'm supposed to go to special stores. And so I went to like the one health food store that was probably in all of New York City. That's what it felt like to me at the time. I didn't even know they existed. And I found you have to buy special vegetables as a vegetarian. So I went to the back of the store, and they had like the half dead, you know, 5 pieces of organic vegetables. And so I bought my little half dead pieces of organic vegetables, and I took them home, and I said, wow, this has to get better. Something has to give. I'm missing something. But needless to say, it got better and better. I think New York City, Manhattan alone, I think has something like 83 vegetarian restaurants or vegan restaurants. It's like some crazy number. And I could also tell you other places around the world, of course, you know, and then I lived in California and San Francisco. That just is booming now. But that's always been, you know, the vegan movement has always been fine. Nobody's really given me a hard time there. China is actually becoming way more vegan from my angle. I remember the first year I raced in China was maybe 7 years ago. And they were a little bit hesitant to, you know, to kind of cater to my funny diet. And I think that was a cultural thing too, because in their culture, to give you meat is something special. You know, you're supposed to give your guests, you know, the expensive meat. So they didn't understand that all I wanted is a bowl full of vegetables. But year after year, yeah, it's just gotten so much easier. They understand me more. As soon as I say vegan, the word vegan, even their understanding for China, that's just amazing. Yeah, so, and even there, you can have no problem eating vegan anymore. But the first year, that sucked. And I did a few races in Cyprus. That was another place that's changed a lot. Now Cyprus is becoming more vegan. Again, the first time I went there, it was like impossible. Like they put the chicken broth or whatever in everything. So yeah, it's changed a lot. I could go on and on with countries, but you go, oh, France. I had to race the Tour de France on, I've told you this, Karin, on green beans and French bread, because the French refused to serve pasta without butter on it. That was just not done. You can't serve anything without butter on it, except for green beans. Green beans. So yeah, so I did the Tour de France on green beans and French bread.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's absolutely brilliant.
But it's
And
better now.
yeah, of course, of course. You know, it just makes me want to travel around the world even more. But at the moment, you know, you can hardly just go down the road. But, you know, it's wonderful to hear of these brilliant, everything sort of moving forward. Like we've had our other speakers as well. And I've just found everyone so inspirational. Christine, I think there's a book, isn't there? Christine's, you know, tour of the vegan world while she's on the block.
Oh, that's funny. You know, what's really interesting about this whole Corona situation is, I shouldn't really say this, but privately, a lot of us athletes are thinking, wow, this is ideal for us. Not the people dying or getting sick. That sucks. But the idea that people are like not shaking my hand all the time, or kissing me, or coming in my space, or, you know, it's like, I don't have to deal with all this and the germs and the making me sick, and because we're fragile creatures. Athletes are fragile creatures, you know, so we're really excited. Like, this is our dream come true, except for the no racing and the no traveling. And yeah, that it's killing people, and that sucks. But yeah,
Christian,
but if that wasn't bad.
No, of course, you're brilliant. Thank you. Tim, who are we going to chat to next?
Tim, you're on mute. You've forgotten you muted yourself, Tim.
Thanks for that, Jay, because I was coughing earlier and I didn't want to interrupt, so thanks for pointing that out. You can see I've been doing this for quite a while, few days now. We've got Maccabee coming on in about half hour, so we've been chatting for an hour. We've been hearing about, you know, some pretty wide-ranging stories there, different perspectives. All of them got quite a lot in common, though, that veganism is really growing, and that all of our experiences are seeing veganism on the rise, but also I think an understanding that human justice and animal justice work together, and that if we want, and planetary justice, you know, if we want to see these problems come to an end, then, you know, they are connected, and it doesn't help to separate them out. And I think what we have seen is a big move in the animal movement globally, and I've heard a lot of it during this last 2 or 3 days, actually, the similar strains of identifying these problems and working together to remove them all. What I would ask you all to do just now is fairly briefly, so in a space of probably about 2 to 3 minutes, just touch on what you think might be the blocks. We've heard about that, a lot of positive growth over veganism and social justice movements and understanding of them growing. What do you see might be the blocks? Jay, I know you and I have already talked about a possible block to real growth, and that's just the apathy, the fact that people, they've got this sort of performative aspect, and then, yeah, where are they a month later? What's your big concern, if you have, and what do you think we should be doing? You know, that's going to block or get in the way that we have to pay.
I mean, that is a massive, wide question, which you have like them built into like multiple bits. But
we've got 2 minutes. That's all right.
I think something that jumped out at me before you even got to that point was, again, it's maybe it's even a nuance of language, but it obviously plays deeper than that. And it's about us putting prefixes on stuff like animal justice, human justice, and I'm like, there can only be justice. There can only be empathy. There can only be one. When you're breaking these things down into prefixed, I think there is inherently a part of the problem, because in your own mind, you're already compartmentalizing. And in this kind of consumer capitalist world, which pushes you to individualize everything, it even makes you individualize your concerns, which is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's what jumped out at me before you even got to the question, just from hearing, like, you know, when we're talking about social justice, animal justice, I'm like, it should just be a conversation of justice. We should all be in it together. And again, I know that is, at the moment, it seems quite blue sky to say that because we're far from it. But all I can think is that until we are able to look at a shared value system, like as opposed to where we all think we're coming from individually, there will never even be a table that we can all have a discussion around. Because we, again, over the last 10 years, what we have seen, the nefarious gains of whether or not it be the evolution of technology at a far faster pace than our own human social evolution, we have now been hacked. We, like, systems and governments and technology know more about us than we know about ourselves. And the danger is if that carries on at the pace that it does, without us going, whoa, we need to slow this stuff down, rather than keep on agreeing with Apple's updates of let's shorten the sequences again, let's shorten the sequences again. We can't keep on shortening sequences. Unless we bring things back out and look at them at their constituent parts, we are racing to the edge of a cliff. It's my 2 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's true that, you know, part of the reason we're looking at them as compartmentalized is because if you look at the growth of veganism, veganism has grown as a social justice movement in the UK. It's been a very much with left-wing values of sharing and caring and socialist values in many respects. And the growth of veganism, of course, means that mainstream veganism is now, there's many people of different thinking. And what used to bind us all, certainly when I went vegan 30 years ago, everybody used to think pretty much we're all on the same page. We're all really what you call the underclass. You know, a bunch of very radical thinking people and living. You know, I mean, when I went vegan, I was living in a bender on the side of the road and living like, you know, as a traveller. And we were all living very, very radical lives. And of course, now we're seeing veganism is a mainstream option, but with that becomes mainstream and what I would call conservative values with a small c. And I know that Simohamed, you mentioned some of this yourself, talking about blocks to the growth of veganism is that, you know, that's part of it is the, so Simohamed, I'm just going to ask you to come in and say what you think about what you see as the, you know, some of the obstacles to the growth of veganism within, especially North Africa and Muslim communities. Simohamed, hello. Hello, Simohamed.
He's on mute. There he's off.
There he is. Hello, Simohamed. Can you hear us? Can we unmute him? Hello, Simohamed.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Did you get my question there?
Yeah, for Arab people or Muslim people have all day every week to watch the butcher slaughter chicken in front of them, not like in Europe or US, just to buy it in supermarkets. No, in Morocco or Arab country, to buy it in butcher slaughter chicken in front of them after buying it. So we watch you must watch the slaughter, the torture of animal every day, all the time. So if you watch this all the time, you don't need to watch, for example, in Morocco or Arab country, Dominion or Earthlings film. So because it's the waitness, all the stage of charter animal endure every day, all the time. So because in Islam have, if you say for example Allahu Akbar or just something like that, who slaughter the sheep or the chicken, it's mean the mercy for animals. So the people, it's the way of mercy for animals is very difficult to convince Arab people to, because the religion and culture which another interpretation of concept the mercy for animals. So we have now activists in MENA region, environments, climate change, or health, not veganism, but just plant-based. But this is the best way to convince Arab people or Arab society to switch in veganism. So the way of mercy, empathy, compassion, it's not the best way to convince Arab people to go vegan. So that's it.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's something I talked about a little bit in my own talk when I was talking to you guys 2 weeks ago about the importance of understanding veganism, but then using the appropriate tools, or the tools that are the best suited to cultures. And you know, you've explained really clearly there that, you know, the understanding of that. I know in the UK you often hear people will say, oh, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegan. But you
That's
know
not true.
what you're saying is that, well, actually no, because in Morocco and places, you know, people grow up seeing animals being killed all the time, and it becomes actually normal part of the culture and makes it even harder. So Simohamed, thank you really very much for that really, really unique, interesting insight, and that very articulate. I must compliment you. Thank you for your English. You know, it's really good, far better than my French was. So well done. That's great. And Sheila, you know, you're seeing obviously a perspective where, especially in Palestine, there's some a real shortage of options. But I mean, what do you see as you've travelled the world now, you've been out of the UK a long time, you've been with Sea Shepherd, you've been living in Egypt and working there, running a vegan cafe. What do you see as the main blocks that are getting in the way still?
Here, probably just availability of vegan options. I mean, it's getting better. Like a lot of the restaurants here since we opened and they saw us being successful, were that there's more vegan options in a lot of the regular restaurants in this town for sure. And even in like bigger cities as well. It's like even in the 3 years that we've been open, I've seen more and more places in Cairo opening, and again, more and more vegan options. There's big Facebook groups for vegans in Egypt, like people recipe sharing, and just the information is spreading, which is really good. Again, I think the interference of the overdeveloped world and the corporations in this region does have a huge impact, because fast food is everywhere and it's becoming endemic or like an epidemic, because the corporations want to move into new markets. So that creates a problem, because then it's sort of more fashionable for like young people to go out to, you know, McDonald's. We haven't got McDonald's here yet, alhamdulillah, but you know, it's in the next town. It's in Sharm el Sheikh, like catering to all the tourists. So that's one of the things that, like, this sort of grassroots people power pushback. We don't have the money. We don't have the like the access to social media that the big corporations do. It's like we don't have money for advertising, but that's what's really encouraging and what's really strong to see this growing just from people and from like person to person interaction. And for sure, there's places here where the choice is still a luxury, but again, the actual price, the cost of like staple foods for a more plant-based like diet are still always a lot less than the meats and fish that's available. And I know like culturally it's a big thing, because as the Moroccan Simohamed was saying about the festivals and Eid, we face those cultural things the same as we face in the West at Christmas, that it's just like, oh, well, this is what we do at Christmas. But, you know, shwaya, things are changing and slowly, but that's one of the blocks, I think, is this sort of like, again, it's like what you're saying about the connection with people and animals. It's like the fantasy world. Like in the West, we're just disconnected from it, because you go to the supermarket, you go to a fast food outlet, you don't see the reality. Here, the reality is more obvious, like where we are, there's a butcher shop right behind, and we see what happens to the animals. So in a way, it's maybe harder for people to be sort of in this fantasy world here, but it's, again, like the overdeveloped world's influence, the social media influence, people can live in that fantasy. So again, it's bringing it back to the reality and bringing it back to the action that people can actually do and get involved with on like day-to-day behavior and day-to-day like activities. It's interesting what Christine was saying about sports, because here we've got the Red Sea, we've got a famous blue hole, which is like 100 meters deep, and we have loads and loads of free divers that come to Dahab. So they're top athletes. We have a lot of world champions and national champions that come here to train. And I've seen over the 7 years that I've been here, like a huge change in those athletes' behavior, because our current female world champion is more or less plant-based, and 2 or 3 of the top guys are also more or less plant-based. And I've just seen like a huge drop in meat and animal product consumption by those athletes, and a huge rise in like plant-based diets, which is amazing to see. And that's good, because that creates role models. It creates the sort of like the fashion, the trend that like people do want to get involved in. If they see a world champion plant-based, they're like, maybe there's something to this. Like we showed Game Changers here last year, and we had like 100 people came to the screening, and a lot of them were free divers, and we had some of the world champions like send us some messages as well. And that was really cool to see, because people don't usually come out in those numbers just to come and see a documentary. And it was really, really nice to see that. It felt really cool to see that, and to have, be honoured to host that here, and to see some of the reactions to it was great, especially that part of the movie. But there we go. Whatever it takes.
That's brilliant. I think that's true. It is, and I think we should be. I know we touched on this a few times during the whole course, and I know my colleague Roger Yates often says this: is that really should understand. If you understand why vegan, then the how is another thing. And it's important to understand why people should go vegan, and then how we can go is a lot easier to kind of go onto. And if that means focusing on the benefits of plant-based diets, that's a really powerful tool. And we should never be afraid to do that. At the same time, we should always understand the underpinning principles of justice, as Joe mentioned, that kind of run throughout. But I think you can do both. And as Simohamed was saying, like some things work better than others in different cultures. And I think understanding it. Cina, Ebrahimi, I know you're sitting there. You're in a really tough part of the world right now for many reasons. Kind of conflict, really. On the one hand, a lot of privilege, and on the other hand, a lot of oppression, very conflicting times. How do you see that affecting the growth of veganism where you live?
So veganism itself, I think, is actually booming around here. I don't see it really cutting back on veganism or affecting the growth of veganism. I do think that what's happening here is really going to say a lot about how the greater social justice framework is going to look like in the future. And if the greater social justice framework is going to have a hard time, then that means the animal movement is going to have a hard time. Like what I really appreciate what Jay said about, you know, people hold up these things saying animal rights, human rights, or animal rights, or animal justice, human justice. There's only one kind of justice. If you compartmentalize these, and all the people who like say those things are the ones who talk about intersectionality. And another thing is the people who talk about intersectionality, they say, oh no, we need to care about humans first, or if we do this stuff about animals, it's going to offend human beings who come from oppressed groups. I find that really ironic, because people who advocate for intersectionality talk about how these things are connected and how you don't have to pick and choose because they feed into each other. And the fact that they would prioritize one oppression over another while talking about intersectionality, I find that really ironic. And so, yeah, when the rest of the social justice movement fails at these things, the animal advocacy movement is too. Another thing I find interesting is people talk about how, you know, this kind of animals first mindset that some animal advocates have leads to upholding human oppression. And I agree that it does, but people have gone in the opposite direction saying, oh, well, we need to take care of humans first. If we don't take care of humans first, how are we going to take care of animals? But the people who do that, in turn, uphold animal oppression. That's when you people have making defenses of speciesism, like the way certain cultures use animals in their traditions, or, you know, referring to the police as pigs and things like that. So what Jay said was completely accurate. If you view these things as separate, or if you view one as inherently ending the other, so therefore you have to tackle that first, the whole thing is just going to go downhill.
Thanks, and I'm really, really thrilled that you've been able to join us. I said I've been, you know, I lurk in your group, so I'll keep an eye on what you've been up to and such like. It's got a really interesting perspective there, and thank you for all your bravery too, because I know you're still hurting from, you haven't mentioned that, which is, you know, but I know you got badly wounded, basically got shot by a rubber bullet, didn't you, I think?
Ah.
Yeah, so this guy's got, you know, like a pretty bruised leg that I've seen on Facebook, which I'm not going to ask you to show, but I think you really are, you know, you put yourself in the front line there. So, and you know, Sheila, I know you do the same in many ways. You know, it's a very brave aspect. And Simohamed, again, that bravery of working within and confronting what you're seeing with such positive contributions. And Jay too, you know, like to be able to come up with what you've done, and now you've done a step further, which is become a trustee of the Vegan Society, which is even more. I mean, that could be your biggest biggest step yet. So, but I'm thrilled about that. We're going to wrap up pretty soon, because I know we've got Maccabee just waiting, and Karin and I have to actually just have 5 minutes to say hello to Maccabee, and then we're going to be interviewing him on our next live stream at 9 o'clock. But before we go, I think, first of all, just to reiterate my very much gratitude for you guys joining us tonight and bringing these perspectives. I think it's really important that we try and use this new online concept to try and be supportive, especially for remote areas. This is what I saw with VegFest Morocco. It was becoming accessible to some of the vegans in some really remote areas with real challenges. And I think the fact that they can come in and feel connected, and to be able to have such interesting, dynamic guests as yourself is really valuable. And I hope this grows, and I hope that we're able to develop this and help empower and share and inspire, and even just stay in touch, really, is something really positive as this globe and this drama unfolds, this global pandemic drama. All of which of us are having to deal with, and none of us really understand. But I'm going to ask Christine actually to wrap up with your absolutely fantastic style, Kristen, because you always bring a touch of class and style and humour to the VegFest event. So as we leave our global veganism panel, Christine, would you like pretty much the last word here?
Oh my God. That's
why not?
That's some serious pressure. Oh my God.
You're used to it. We know you can handle it.
Yeah, I don't have gee, and here I was trying to, you know, I'm like sitting here preparing for, oh no, I'm going to be asked, like, you know, because I studied to be a neurosurgeon, so like I'm very good at like taking tests, so I was all ready for the pressure of like, what do you think it takes to get rid of these blocking stone, you know, these blocks in the way from being vegan? Yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't really have much to say. I'm so sorry. It's I could tell you that, oh, I got a story for you. I got one. This one's for you, but I'm going to do the bleeps just for you. Ready, Tim? All right. That one day, I forgot to tell you a little bit about that last day of training camp with the pro men. I'm riding up this climb in Spain, hauling butt. And on my butt, I actually had my vegan shorts on. So it said like vegan big on my butt with like the Vegan Society logo. And I passed the Spanish guy. And what does he say as I'm passing him? He says, holy.
Okay.
and he said that after, and then he stood up. And then he started like pedaling really hard. And then he had to sit back down because he couldn't catch me. And then I heard a few other words that would have been bleeped out. And it was the funniest darn thing because I know he saw my butt.
You knew that was coming.
Christine, that's wonderful. Well done. With that wonderful picture in our mind and that thought, we will hold that thought. But look, people, it's been fantastic. I really am grateful for you joining us tonight. If you've been watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. Just a reminder, you can still watch this again for 30 days. It is being recorded. Very welcome to pop back and, you know, come and share it, bring your friends, and, you know, don't mind if it gets shared around and stuff. So well done. Look, folks, thanks ever so much. That's it. Now we're going to wrap up, say goodbye. And again,
I'd say something real quick.
Just say thank you. Good night, Cina.
Later.
Jay?
Everyone, I'm on Facebook. I really enjoyed hearing everyone talk. Christine, Sheila, Karin, Jay, Simohamed, you know, please add me on Facebook. I would love to talk with you more about these things. Thank you, Tim, for putting this on and having me. You're awesome. You're all awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, honestly.
I second that. I second that from Cina. But I mean, I couldn't use the words any better to compliment everybody who's been on this evening's conversation. Thank you again from the new trustee of the Vegan Society.
Well done, Joe. Long may you last. Oh, you're good. Sheila, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us. And Simohamed from Morocco, well done.
Thank you so much, Tim, for giving me this opportunity, and welcome to Morocco every time, anytime.
You know that I'm coming. I'm going to be there. See you soon. Good night then, everybody. Karin, we'll see you in 5 minutes over with Maccabee. Thanks a lot. Good night, Sheila.
Thank you, everybody.